Um, can you tell me some of the? I know in our previous interview you talked about hanging out a lot with Heron and
Yeah.
going to Compton and things like that. Can you tell me about some of the stuff that you guys would do as far as what about Compton fascinated you? Because I know you had mentioned that a lot of that stuff
Yeah.
at that age and at that time of your life did fascinate you.
Yes.
Can you tell me some of the stuff that you did and that you experienced, and then what your outlook on it is now,
Yes.
as far as in the mind state that you're in now?
I think I was fascinated because, I really came from the hood. You know what I mean? I think I come from a part of New Jersey where my brothers and them and my cousins and my relatives, they was the individuals who was running the neighborhoods, you know what I mean? So when I went to California and I met people like Heron and Buntry and them, they reminded me of old heads from my neighborhood. Like, West Coast call them OGs, we call them old heads, you know what I mean? So it was the same mindset, just different structure. So it just felt like I was right at home, going from New Jersey, going from my neighborhood and going straight to West Coast, even though West Coast was just divided, every hood was divided by a different gang. You know what I mean? We didn't have gangs back in the day in Jersey. But and Heron, we clicked, you know what I mean? And some of the events, you can ask Risky. Y'all know Risky, right? From the one who drew the Machiavelli and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time we
Mm-hmm.
was in Compton with Heron, and we get a call. I guess some dudes were trying to push up on Risky, and and Risky called Heron, and Heron was like, "Napoleon, you strapped?" And I always kept a gun on me. That's I always kept a gun on me. I was like, "Of course." And he was like, "Some dudes trying to bother Risky." So we went. I don't even know what was the problem, but they was at Risky house. Risky lived in Compton back then. So when we rolled over there, I guess Risky was even surprised to see me there with Heron. You know what I mean? And of course, the dudes got up off of, Risky and they went about their business. But it was just a particular time where Heron would call, and he used to refer to us as outlaws most of the time. Outlaw, you ready to go to Compton? We would go with him, jump in the car. I would go with him. Out of all of the outlaws, I was just fascinated with Compton. Whack Deuce, shout out to Whack Deuce. So I used to go to his crib a lot. And it was just that environment. You got to remember my mindset as a young 18, 19, 20 years old. It was just that type of mindset coming from New Jersey, Irvington, going to Compton and LA. It was similar to my environment. You know what I mean? One particular time I was actually supposed to go with Heron, and because Heron, I believe he was staying in the valley. He was staying in the valley at this particular time. So I would park my car and hop in his car. And one day he called me and he was like, I'm gonna go to Compton, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna meet you. My son Salik, which is my oldest son, I get a call from his mother, and she last minute she was like, you got to come get your son. And I remember I'm upset because I want to go to Compton. I'm like, no, I got to go to
Mm-hmm.
Compton to do what? Just ride around with Heron. You know what I mean? And then I kind of got into, his mother was kind of upset, like, I got to do something. You got to come get your son. So I went and got my son. And I remember telling Heron, I can't come with you this day. And a couple hours later,
Mm-hmm.
I get a phone call from Whack Deuce, and he was like, "Man, Heron just got shot up. They riddled his car with bullets." So can you imagine that there was a chance that I was supposed to be, not supposed to, because it was written I would have been with him, but I was supposed, I was planning to be with him that day. You know what I mean? And I remember Whack telling me he was at the light, and Whack, you know what I mean, heard the story or whatever. I don't know if Whack was there, but he was just like, they shot his car up. So it was a crazy situation. You know what I mean? And that's the last time that I ever spoke to Heron, was the day that happened. Unfortunate, but Heron was a dude. Heron was a good dude. He was crazy though. I remember another time we was at the Scarface album release party, and he got into it with the Rolling 60s. And even though
Mm-hmm.
Heron was short and structured, but this dude was fearless. You know what I mean? He was fearless. He had a
Mm-hmm.
Death Row jacket on, and I think they was trying to. He had some words, and bottles was getting thrown, and but Noble got hit in the head with a glass bottle. It was crazy. But at that particular time, my mindset, I used to love. You got to remember, man, and I don't say this to boast, but I was the wildest of the outlaws. Jersey, I came from the wildest hood from all the outlaws. I was the wildest. Now, because my religion, I changed, I became Muslim, you mature, you look back at these things and you say, you sometimes see that I put myself in so many, you know, unfortunate situations that if I would have knew what I knew now, I would have avoided it, but everything is written, you know what I mean? So I just try to I tell my kids and also any other kids, when we tell these stories, it's not to glamorize it, because these stories most of the time, 90% of the time, have a bad ending. You know what I mean? So we need someone that survived that type of lifestyle to tell the kids don't make the same mistakes that we made. But back then, that was my mindset. You know, I just love crazy stuff.
And being fascinated with all that goes on in Compton, you're hanging around Heron and Buntree, these guys. Obviously, like a lot of people know people that are in that life, that are in the gangbang life. They glorify it. They love it. Was there ever? I don't want to say pressure because I don't feel that that's the proper word. But was there ever enough intrigue to where you felt like this is a path I could go down, or was it always just a friend associate kind of thing with them, and never a thing where you would get that deep into it?
You know, I would say I never got that. My hood, though, in Jersey, my block, my neighborhood, they bloods. You know what I mean? So I went through that phase where, because I was from that neighborhood, I was from my block. So you might see pictures of me throwing up certain signs and stuff like that. But I went through that phase because that's my hood became bloods. You know what I mean? Paru bloods. It was called Jersey Mob. But I think because I was in the music industry, I never really got full-fledged where you're not going to have me on a record with Tupac and tomorrow I'm doing a drive-by shooting because this dude got the wrong color. I was smarter than that, you know what I mean? I knew I had some common sense now, you know what I mean? But I think because when we was in L.A., being around Pac, we was introduced to Bloods and Crips, you understand? So it wasn't like we had to pick a side because, like I said, Rated R and them, they still are homies to this day. Macadosha, they was from Rolling 40 Crips. Big Syke was from Imperial Village Crips from Inglewood. You had Speedy was also a good friend of ours, you know what I mean? And then White Deuce was also very close with us. So we was able to rub shoulders with, Bloods and Crips. So we didn't really just pick a side like that, you know what I mean? Besides my neighborhood in New Jersey becoming Bloods, and I went through a certain phase, and then after that, I grew past it.
Okay. And then, obviously you mentioned Thug Life. Tupac did an interview and they asked him, do you have a new rap group? And he said, yeah. He said, I got the Outlawz. He said, I murdered Thug Life as far as their careers, and I gave birth to the Outlawz. There's obviously numerous interpretations about this because he did kind of stop messing with the Thug Life guys at one time. Any insight as to what happened as far as him not hanging with them or recording with them?
I think because shout out to Runner, Rated R. He's locked up in prison. He became Muslim, alhamdulillah. Shout out to Rated R. And I hope he gets some attention on this case because it really was self-defense, But Rated R, the reason why Tupac stopped messing with Thug Life, because I think that the incident that pretty much the straw that broke the camel back was imagine they had to deal with Interscope Records, bro, and Rated R and Big Syke, and it really was from Rated R. They get into an argument in the office of Interscope Records with all these execs, you know what I mean? And they start gangbanging on each other. Rated R called his homies from Rolling 40s. They came up there, gloves on, covering their faces. In the scope, you know what I mean? And Rated R wanted to fight Big Syke. So when Pac got this was embarrassing for Pac, you know what I mean? He bring this group and he said, this isn't that. But back then, Rated R, shout out to Rated R. He's a good dude. He's my brother. I spoke to him a few months ago. But, he matured, of course, now. But back then, Rated R, he was a real gang member. You understand? He was a real, even though Big Syke also, he was a real gang member. So he looking at it from a gang member's point of view, with Pac looking at it like this is business. And if you guys gonna, if they're gonna come up in Interscope and be doing some gang banging in the middle of Interscope Records, I can't deal with them anymore. So I think was the main reason that Pac stopped dealing with the Thug Life. But they always been family. He never cut that off with, you know what I mean? They always been family. Syke was more diplomatic. Big Syke was more diplomatic. That's why he was able to continue to work with Big Syke. But Rated R was crazy. You know what I mean? He just was a wild dude.
And Dad's always said something. I just want to get your thoughts on it real quick. Dad's always said Tupac was a Crip before he was a Blood because he was a Crip with the Thug Life guys, and then he came to Death Row and he was a Blood. And he always throws his little sneak things in there. What are your thoughts when he says stuff like that? I really
don't know, man. Even he definitely was rolling tight with the with Thug Life. They was all Crips. Some of Pac closest people that he had in LA was Crips, you know what I mean? But then again, you had Pac that always used to say, man, he was shot. It doesn't matter if you blood or cuz, you know what I mean? He was trying to be in the middle when it comes to that. He had, you know, Bloods and Crips friends. It just was, that's part of, you know, especially when you coming from outside of LA and you move to LA, most of the time that's going to be your situation. If you don't pick a side, you're going to have people from both sides, you know what I mean? And that's how I look at the Pac situation.